when you are in this gallery, you're in a time capsule of Stevens. And him today, or him on Wednesday, to him back in grad school days. It's a pretty amazing thing. And art does that. It takes you to different places and different times. And that's what makes this all so exciting. I think it's the first retrospective I've been part of here, ever. 27 years. So thank you all for coming, and be proud of me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and those of you that know me know that I'm very shy speaking in front of you. So if I stutter or whatever, you'll forgive me. I want to just start out by thanking some people so I don't forget, and then we can talk about the work. I'll explain some things. You can ask questions, and I want you to get I want you to take in as much as you can about the show. The show does go from my undergraduate years all the way through these three pieces, which I fired 2 weeks ago. So it is a true retrospective and a true view of what I've done and how the work has evolved and where I am today. So let me just thank a few people. So first to Craig, and as he said, the concept for this goes back a few years, and it emanated from him knowing my work because I've had work in group exhibitions here. The Art Complex Museum has a relationship, a long-time relationship with Thayer Academy, which is where I teach. And I'll introduce Charlie, who's here in here. Is he, Charlie?
Wait for
I'll introduce him. Now I know who he is. The secret's out. But I'll introduce him again. And I have a personal connection with the museum too, because as I said, I've been in group exhibitions. And I'll tell a story about when Charlie and I first met in a little while. So I'm thanking Craig and also Susan. Susan, where are you? Susan is there. So they did the installation. Susan I know a few people who are OCD. I just met a person who is now at the top of the OCD. And I'm grateful to her for being on top of all of the labeling, the helping with the installation, putting things in order, making sure everything is accurate. And she was amazing. I want to thank Lori. Where's Lori? Lori, right there, also very instrumental in making this whole thing happen. Julia, is Julia here?
She's not here.
She couldn't make it, okay. So Julia is a contact that I have here because I'm going to be doing a throwing demonstration and a raccoon firing in April, I think it is. So everybody will get an announcement about that. So first, Charlie. So Charlie and I go back a lot of years. When I was writing my first book in 1988, I called the museum knowing that they have a substantial and very important collection of ancient raccoon. I didn't know exactly what they had because I'd never seen it before. So I called Charlie, introduced myself, told him what I was doing, and I asked him if I could come and take a look and maybe photograph some of the raccoonware. So he said, sure, let's make an appointment. We made a date. I came here. He took me downstairs. And there's a rolling cart with a black velvet tablecloth on it. And on this, sitting on the tablecloth, is a selection of the most important ancient raccoonware anywhere in the world, including a piece made by the first raku potter in the late 1500s. His name is Tanaka Shojiro. And he says, here they are. He explains them. He says, take as much time as you want, photograph them, pick them up, hold them, put them to your lips so you see how it feels when you're drinking matcha. And he said, when you're done, just come upstairs. So he walks out of the room and I'm standing there as though I was hallucinating. You never get, unless you own one of these, you never get to handle any of these. And here I am picking up Shojiro's chawan and putting it to my lips. I thought I can't even explain it, but I thought I was having a word that starts with an O and ends in an M. So that's how we met, and that's how I made my initial connection to the museum. And Charlie's family, the Warehousers, also funded the building of our gallery in Thayer. with a unique stipulation that it not be a multi-use space. Must be used as a gallery, and that has been the case since it was built in 1968. So anybody else in the school that wants to use it has to go through the art department and get our permission. And that's a unique and a wonderful thing that not that many schools, even prep schools, have. A lot of the schools have galleries, but whether they're dedicated gallery spaces and not multi-use spaces is rare. It's unusual. A handful of people that have been very influential in my learning and practice about raccoon. The one is, well, three of them, Richard Milgram, who is a potter from Massachusetts, now lives full-time in Kyoto. And he is one of the few Western potters whose tea ceremony wear is accepted by the tea community in Japan. Very rare for a Western potter to be accepted. So Richard has been very, very important in my learning about raku and learning about tea wear. Marvin Sweet, who tragically passed away several years ago. His wife Catherine is here. Marvin was a dear friend, and I'll tell you a quick story about Marvin. So we both collect Yixing teapots. So they came over for dinner one night, and Marvin's looking at my collection, and his collection is amazing. My collection is just good. So he sees this one teapot. It's a pewter encapsulated teapot going back to about 1850, made in Yixing. And he looks at it, and we were also planning on trading some work. So he brought some of his work. We were going to trade some pieces. So he looks at that and he says, "I want that." And I already knew how significant it was. I said, "You can't have that." He said, "I want that." "You can't have it." So from then on, every time we spoke or every time we saw each other, he started the conversation or the meeting with, "You know that teapot? I want that." He never got it. And I'm not sorry that he never got it, because it's an amazing piece. And Catherine knows exactly what I'm talking about. John Baymore, potter in New Hampshire, a scholar of Japanese history and culture, and also an accomplished samurai swordsman, who's been to Japan many times. Another dear friend of mine who was very instrumental in me learning about not just raku, because he didn't do raku very much, but just about teaware, about Japanese history and culture. Very important to me. People that I want to thank and to just acknowledge is Dr. Joseph Chazen and his wife, Helene. Joseph recently passed away this past summer. He was the first collector and benefactor of me as a clay artist and as a potter and as a maker of things. And he bought my first piece when I was in graduate school at RISD and continued to buy work over the years. He donated 2 pieces of mine to the RISD Museum. He donated a piece of mine to the Fuller Craft Museum. And we would connect every so often. He'd come to the studio, he'd see what I was doing. And he was very, very important to my collection, to my work. And the only dinnerware set out of stoneware of anything that I ever made, I made for his wife, Helene, for their summer house in Narragansett. And when she asked me if I would do that, I hesitated. I said, "I don't make dinnerware. I don't make functional wear anymore." I didn't say that to her. I said, "Of course I'll do it." I went to the studio. I had to teach myself again how to make a plate, how to make a bowl, how to make a platter, how to make a pitcher. And it was a dinnerware set which encompassed every possible piece that you could imagine. So that was Joseph Chazen. So I just want to acknowledge him. My parents, obviously, both of whom have passed on, but both very supportive of my work, supportive of my education as an artist and in art experience. I want to acknowledge my aunt Gloria, who couldn't be here. She's celebrating her 90th birthday in New York, although she lives in South Carolina with my cousin and his wife, my cousin Jay there. They came up from South Carolina and Bettina, and we're going to be in New York to celebrate her 90th birthday. But she did give them a gift to give me with a beautifully written card. And when Bettina gave it to me last night, she said, "Don't open this in front of the kids." Well, the kids are here, but I'm going to tell everybody what was in it. You know what was in it?
No.
Okay.
Book?
What was in it, aside from, in addition to the card, was 3 Ziploc bags of mandel bread. Mandel bread is the Jewish version of biscotti. And she's an expert baker, and that's what was in them. So you guys can have some. And the last person I want to thank, who is not here because he's also passed on. And this is emotional. And this is my wife's father, Sidney. Sidney and I started off on a really bad note. I was a senior in high school. Ellen was a freshman in college. I wasn't good enough for Ellen. I was a stupid teenager who did stupid things. And, you know, I mistreated Ellen time and time again, and yet she still held on there. Ultimately, Sidney and I became so close. I was closer to Sidney than I was with my own father. And he was a mentor, but a mentor in life. He didn't know a lot about art. He knew that he didn't. He knew what he didn't know, but he loved my work. When my first book came out, he was just kvelling, a Jewish word for celebrating and taking pride in something. And we lived that relationship until the day that he died. And I need to thank him. I'll talk about Jared a little bit later in the talk. I've always had a career in clay. Ellen has always known me as a clay artist. Even when I was a senior in high school, I was making a sculpture in my garage, although deep down inside my heart, I was a jock. I wanted to go to college to major in physical education and become a professional coach or a physical therapist or kinesiologist or something in the athletic world. And we dated for 6 years before we got married. So she knew me all the time as a clay artist. So when Jared was a junior, the spring of his junior year of high school, we hadn't yet spoken about college. I was a senior advisor, spoke to all my advisees about college, never spoken to Jared. We had never had a conversation about college. So we're at the dinner table, Adam and Jared and Ellen and I, talking about our day, what did you do in school today, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then there was some silence. And then all of a sudden, Jared says, I think I want to go to art school. So immediately, the rest of his life flashes before my eyes. He's going to go to art school. He's going to major in pottery. He's going to follow in my footsteps. He's going to take over my studio. He's going to travel. He's going to do an internship in Peru. He's going to do an internship in Switzerland. And the whole thing flashed before my eyes. And then there was silence. So there was silence during this time. And then all of a sudden, Ellen says, art school? How are you going to make a living? So I looked at Ellen looked at me, Adam and Jared and I looked at Ellen, and then we all started to laugh. And we had already been married for 22 years. And the 6 years before that when we were dating. How are you going to make a living? So where are you? On the way here, and weeks leading up to this, she said, I'm not going to tell that story about art school. I don't want to be embarrassed. I said, of course I'm going to tell that story. Oh my gosh. One of the things that is always asked of me at a reception, always by potters, or mostly by potters, and always at the workshops and talks that I give, is when do you know when your piece is finished? So I know what they're asking me. What they're really asking me is, when do you know when to stop? You know, you're at the wheel, when do you know when to stop? So I turn the question back over to everybody there, and I say, well, when do you know the work is is finished? Well, when the neck is tall enough. When do you know? When the body is big enough. When do you know? When I can't pull the clay up anymore. When do you know? And so on and so on and so forth. Comes back around to me. Somebody will say, okay, Steve, now you know when we know when our work is finished. How do you know when your work is finished? My answer always is my work is completed when it's the possession of somebody else. Because I don't make work for myself. I speak through the language of clay. I speak through my art. And while I'm making the work and while the work is sitting here, hopefully it's speaking to you, but I don't know that. When it's in your possession, then I know that that work is completed. So that's my segue into almost everything here is for sale. And there's price list there in the book with other material about myself. Don't try to pick anything up other than the cottage charm ones here. These you can pick up, you can handle, you can hold, you can put them down. The work that is on display on the pedestals is tacked down. So don't try to pick them up, but please do touch. If you're not drawn to touch my work, then you're not attracted to my work. Then you're not connected with the work. My work is all about the outside. It's all about the skin. And I don't see the outside of my work as a canvas upon which to decorate, as a lot of potters to do. And that's not a quality judgment. For me, the surface of my work is a skin. It's revealing what's inside of us, just like the skin that we wear on our bodies. It's holding in our skeleton, our circulatory system, our organs, everything else. Our air, our lungs are holding everything in as we breathe. And that's how I see the surface of my work. And that's what I try to express when I'm making my work. So you'll see work that looks like it leaned up against the bark of a tree, or the work that I may have rolled on the floor and picked up the cracks in the concrete, or things like that. So that's what is influencing what my work looks like on the outside. And think of what you do as you breathe. So hopefully you see this work that way, and the work as it's breathing. After he passed away, Ellen and Adam and I went to synagogue every day, and we said Kaddish, the Jewish prayer for mourning. As a side note, the interesting thing about Kaddish is that the prayer, although it is said, there's different forms of Kaddish. The mourner's Kaddish is said when a loved one passes away, and it's said for a year. There's nothing in the prayer that mentions or references anything about death or dying. You wouldn't know. If you were reading Hebrew and you weren't Jewish, you wouldn't know what the prayer signified, other than the fact that it is a reaffirmation of your faith. And that reaffirmation of your faith is whatever your faith is. Whether it's your faith in God as a material being, whether it's your faith in yourself, in what you do, whether it's some other kind of spiritual faith, that's what the prayer references. So it's a very unique and interesting prayer in the Jewish liturgy. So I went to my studio every morning when there was nobody there, and I made one Kaddish, which is what I call them, Kaddish Chalans. It was my personal Kaddish to my son, in memory of my son. And these we decided to sell, except for 15 that we have retained. 3 that we retained are here. The first one, the one I made on Jared's birthday, and the final one. All of the others have been sold, they all have not been sold. This is 20 of the remaining 50. And all of the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds of these Kaddish Chalans go to the cancer fighting organization that we support. Primarily the PMC, also the National Brain Tumor Society, and the Livestrong Foundation. These are 3 organizations that were instrumental in helping Jared through his journey with cancer, especially the Livestrong Foundation. And you all have your opinions about Lance Armstrong. And what I tell people is, I will never forgive Lance Armstrong for the lying and the cheating and the bullying and the arm twisting and how he ruined some people's lives. But I will always revere him as the greatest cancer fighting organization the cancer fighting supporter that ever lived. And when Jared was in his last month of treatment, due to Adams reaching out to his coach, Chris Carmichael, and then to Lance via Chris Carmichael earlier, Lance called Jared. And Jared was not, we don't think that he was cognizant enough at that point to hear Lance or certainly to understand what he was saying. But I was listening on the phone and I heard it, and he spoke for a solid 2 minutes. And if we experience 2 minutes right now of silence, you'll know how long 2 minutes can be. And then I spoke to him. And then a few years later, he was one of the celebrity riders in the PMC. We got to meet face to face. And we also met in Austin. And I rode with him for 25 miles on a ride in Austin. And so we made that material connection there as well. And these are poems written by a very, very well-known potter named Jack Troy. And we are also dear friends. He's still making pots. He's in his 90s. He lives in Pennsylvania. And we've traded pots and we've shared stories with each other. And he wrote this book. And curiously, despite how well-known he is as a clay artist, the only national recognition that he's ever received was for his poetry. So these are 2 poems. First is titled Throwing. A month or more, I must have simply watched what he did with his hands while we talked, lumpen earthen flesh forming and reforming. 6 months after witching me the spell, he died. Some mornings, waking, I'm not sure, it wasn't something I dreamed, that synapse of his hands on mine. I can't assume my flesh on earth's can coax a vessel into being. Then the day's first trial. I nudge the lump, a bull's fresh history opens out. The same old hands are up to it again, throwing. And then the last thing is a poem titled Containment. I have picked up, moved, shaped, and lightened myself of many tons of clay, and those tons lifted, moved, and shaped me, delivering me to this living space I wake and move about in. Space perhaps equal to that I have opened and enclosed in plate, cup, bowl, jug, jar. I am thankful no one ever led me to the pit I'd helped to make in earth, or showed me all the clay at once. That heap's about 150 tons. Go make yourself a life. And oh yes, here's a drum of ink. See what you can do with that. I wouldn't have known where to begin. And the reason I read it from the book itself and not, something that I've copied and a sheet of paper that I bring is that this was the first book, the first copy of this book that came off the presses when he got them, and he gave it to me as a gift, and he inscribed it. And his inscription was for Stephen Potter, teacher, reader, enabler, Jack Troy. So. A lot of the pots have specific memories about them and specific important things about them. One that I'll tell you is the pot that's right behind Lisa there, that porcelain vase. So that porcelain vase I made in graduate school, and I used some slips, which are colored clays. I applied them onto the surface. I covered it with a white porcelain glaze, and it came out of the kiln looking like that. Nothing like what I expected it to look like. And what happened there is considered a glaze defect. The glaze just crawled away and just kind of fell off the pot. And I didn't think very much of it when I saw it, then it grew on me, and that piece I gave to Ellen as a wedding gift. Yes, so raku is a firing process that goes back over 400 years to the Kyoto region of Japan. And it was a process that has somewhat of a murky origin. But what is known about it is that there were three people that were involved in formulating and codifying the Japanese tea ceremony that we know today. And one of them was the tea master at the time, Senno Rikyu, who was designing this tea ceremony. The other was Hideyoshi, who was a Japanese warlord who was wealthy beyond comprehension. And he was able to fund this whole project. And then they searched for a potter whose work they felt would go along with how they saw the tea ceremony, being quiet, being tranquil, being individual, being spiritual, not religious, but spiritual. And they found this potter. His name was Tanaka Shojiro. And they taught him how to make these tea bowls. He was making roof tiles, ornately decorated roof tiles. But they liked what his work felt like. They liked the personality of the work. So they taught him how to make tea bowls. There was the three of them, and that's where raku started. The name raku, we're not sure. Some say that it was that it's a word that means tranquility, quiet, meditation, so on and so forth. Other people think that it's named after the region of the area, Joraku, Judo-raku, which is where the clay was found. So we don't really know exactly. And firing process where the pots are taken out of the ground while they're still hot and allowed to cool. So this is the first time that I've seen my work like this, in this kind of chronological, career spanning way. I'm not critical of the work at all, because what you alluded to, yeah, I'm thinking about them mostly about the time that I made them, where I was in my life, what was possibly, what I remember about what was being influenced, what I was being influenced by. My motivation has never changed. So I talk to my students a lot about motivation versus inspiration. Motivation is what drives you to make something, whatever it is. I'm motivated or to do something, and it could be I'm motivated to play hockey, or I'm motivated to read, or I'm motivated to do something else. Inspiration is what influences how the thing that you made appears. So I've always been motivated to make work, but influences have changed, have grown and evolved over the years. So it's emotional to go back in time like this, but to be standing here and to think that, there's a pot that I made as an undergraduate, and these are three pots that I just finished, complete. They're not complete, they're only finished. That I fired 2 weeks ago is really kind of mind-blowing. Yeah. Yes, Serena. So I decided to make one a day to kind of mirror and be a companion to us going to the synagogue and saying the prayer. So that's what motivated me and inspired me to do it. Yeah. Jeff is always sending me pictures of the work that he's doing, and he's in my master class at the studio that I teach. And whenever he sends me something and I tell him what I think and we talk about it, he says, I never cried as much as I have when we kind of really reconnected so closely. So, yeah, Jeff, one of my students, David Techler, is here. Another one of my students. Dave, where are you? Yep. And others. I always wanted to be a teacher. I mean, even when I was a jock and wanted to go to Penn major in physical education, I always wanted to teach. And when I started teaching full-time in 1976, I was teaching at Walpole High School. I was teaching pottery, I was teaching sculpture, and I was teaching a general crafts class. And Walpole in 1976 was a lot different than Walpole is in 2005. It was almost exclusively blue collar. People either worked in the certain teed factory or they worked in the prison. And I had a lot of students that were really, really hard edge and hard nose. It's the only place that I ever had to break up a knife fight. And Ellen came and visited with me one day, and there's a window through the door. And the assistant principal came over and wanted to talk to me for a minute. So I went out of the classroom. Ellen stayed in the classroom. And immediately when the door closed, it was bedlam, right? They were throwing things. They were standing on chairs. They were standing on tables. Crazy. As soon as I walked in, boom. Like it never happened before. Then I found the job at Thayer, and Thayer has been a blessing to me and my family. It's the students all throughout, my colleagues, what I do there, the interest that the kids have in the arts is amazing. We have an extensive theater, music, and visual arts department. It's all elective, so there's nobody in the class that doesn't want to be there. And they come in and they work. And I have students that come in to make stuff that aren't even in the class. They just come in and say, Bram, everybody calls me Bram. Bram, can I just make stuff? I said, sure, take some clay and make stuff. And they learn how to do it. They've got friends in the class. I have other students that come in and they just hang out. They sit on the couch and they just relax, or they're doing homework. I had one student, I came in one morning at about 7:00. I usually get there about 7:30. I came in at 7:00, the lights are off. I walk in, and before I turn the light on, the couch is right there, and there's a student sleeping on the couch. And I didn't want to disturb her, so I didn't turn the lights on. And then she woke up, and I said, Aliana, what? She said, oh, is it okay that I'm here? Is it okay that I came in early and I'm just sleeping on the couch? I said, it's perfectly fine. She said, my mother has to get to work early some days, and it's my only way to get to school. And I know that your studio is always open. I know you have a couch here, so I hope it's okay. I said, Eliana, it's perfectly fine. So that's kind of Thayer in a nutshell. My students, I'm always learning things from my students. It's hard to understand that. How can I be learning from my students? But they're always full of surprises. They're always full of things that they come up with. They're always full of conversation and engagement. And it's one of the things, being there at Thayer and working with those students is one of the most influential experiences that I've had for the last 47 years at Thayer. And I'm not going anywhere fast. So it's all there. Yeah, Debbie.
Do you think you can come up with a general percentage of how many of your students stay to play?
Not really, a lot.
A lot.
All right, so I'll tell a quick story about David. David, where are you? Over here. So David was an outstanding pottery student.
I know.
And that's right, he lived it. So he was an outstanding pottery student from the start. Took pottery for 3 years, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. His parents, Dean and Marie, were totally supportive. They came in sometimes when there wasn't parent conferences. They would see what we were doing. They came to our student exhibitions. They were always supportive and always enthusiastic about David's work and play. Then, when he told them, just like Jared, I think I want to do clay and go to art school, that relationship ended. No more did they want to hear about pottery. David was going to go to law school. He was going to become an attorney. If he wants to do pottery as a hobby later on, he can do that. And that's David's story. And sure enough, he became a high-powered attorney, and he started to do pottery again. And he's in my class at the studio. So I don't know how many. Your next question. Hold that question. I don't know how many, but there are a lot. One other quick story, which is really funny, is Barrett Ward, who never took pottery at Thayer, but at the time I was teaching photography. So she was in my photo class. The photo studio was adjacent to the pottery studio. And she would always be lurking in the pottery studio, just kind of looking around, and her friends were taking pottery, but she never even touched clay. She graduates, she comes back, and I knew that she was going to Alfred University, the School of Art and Design, but she was going for painting, drawing, and photography. So she comes in, she visits her first winter break. She comes in to school, into the studio, and we say hello, we hug, and she says, "Graham, what do you think I'm majoring in?" I said, "Pottery." She said, why? How did you know that? I said, "Barrett, you are always lurking in the pottery studio. You're in the presence of the New York State College of Ceramics. I knew that you weren't just going to be lurking in the clay studio." And now she's the head of the art department at St. Sebastian's, teaching pottery. So a lot of students have gone. I don't know how many. But, the number of students that I've taught at Thayer is, between teaching and coaching is, I don't know, probably 5,000, in 47 years. Because I'm also the 40s track and field coach. It's another non-paying prestigious job. Jimmy.
I'm just wondering, how did you get to be such a great artist and such a great basketball player all at the same time?
Jimmy is one of the only Thayer. We used to have an afternoon or a morning faculty basketball game, and Jimmy was one of the only faculty member players who was able to block my fadeaway jump shot. Just my interest I always loved athletics and played a lot of basketball, played club basketball in college, even tried out for the basketball team, didn't make it, but I ran track. So yeah, basketball was one of my favorite sports. What else? Speak up. Don't be bashful. Mayo.
Whatever happens when you make a mistake in your pot?
Ooh, that's a good question. So sometimes I make a mistake and I can fix it while I'm working. Sometimes I make a major mistake and I just crush it and start over again. It's easy. It's an easy decision. It's an easy decision. I never work too hard to fix something. Either I can fix it pretty quickly or I can't. And it just gets smushed up and remade.
So the blue pot over there, which has what might have been considered an error, how did you then get it to?
Well, also the one on the far right was an error.
So then
Well,
how
then
did
that's
you,
switched
how did you
down.
move it from that to that?
So from being an error to.
Yeah.
So I knew why that happened. And then after a little bit of time, I really liked the effect and I know how to make that happen now. So I do it in my raku work. That the big one on the potter's wheel.
Well, that's like a big. How'd you,
It's a lot of clay. It's like 35 pounds of clay.
but it's too big.
So the tallest spots, these three, four, and the one right behind Jeff over there, those are made using a technique called coiling and throwing. It's a Korean technique where the potter, there are a few different manifestations of it, but what the potter does is puts an amount of clay on the wheel that they're comfortable working with. They pull that up to the beginning of the pot, let it get leather hard, which is soft enough to still attach clay to, but hard enough so it doesn't distort when you're working with it. Add a coil and then continue to shape the pot, continue to pull that up. So the coil on this pot was about the thickness of my wrist. The coil on that one was a little bit thinner. This is 2 coils, that's 3 coils. And this is 1 coil. So the base would have been thrown up to about here, and then I added a coil and just continued it and finished it like that. I wouldn't say favorite or fondest, but I would say most significant was the year that I made the Irish Chelsea. Because that was very different. There was a singular, solitary intention and motivation every day. And the one that I did on day 12 had nothing to do with the one I did on day 11 or anything to do with the one I was going to do on day 13. They were all individual, personal acts of making that stood alone and reflected what was going on that day in my life. Looking out the window, whether it was gray or whether it was sunny or whether it was the winter or the spring or the summer or the fall, whether it was raining, whether it was snowing, what the atmosphere was in the studio, whether the heat was working or it was cool or, whatever was happening around me. And the environment that I live in and move about in is the major influence in all of my works. The difference here is that these are not connected to the one before or the one after. Singular, individual, and singularly personal. Cups, bowls, plates, pitchers, casseroles. I was selling pretty successfully in small craft galleries and boutique shops and things like that. Then I went into the studio one day and I sat down to work and I just wasn't motivated to work. Wasn't inspired by anything, wasn't motivated. Came back the next day, same thing. And I realized that I didn't like the things I was making anymore. I wasn't motivated to do them. I didn't want to do that kind of work anymore because I had also been doing some decorative work. And at that moment, I said to myself, I am no longer going to make work to sell. I'm going to sell the work that I make. And that changed my whole life.